Welcome, and thank you for sending us this absolutely fascinating stack of sources.
It's a great collection.
Today we're taking a deep dive into the recent history and really the future vision of Antigua and Barbuda. We're using the highly anticipated 2026 speech from the throne as our main guide.
And it's an extraordinary document because it forces you to take the long view. I mean, most nations, they measure success in 4 or 5 year cycles.
Election to election.
Exactly. But this speech, it outlines a quarter century of progress. That's the year 2000 all the way up to 2025. It's both a look back and a very clear statement of intent for the next 25 years.
It is, and our mission today is to really unpack the specifics of that timeline. We want to understand the strategic blueprint, the policy decisions, the institutional reforms, and the sort of foundational shifts that allowed this small island nation to not just survive.
Survive is the key word.
But to actually thrive. Despite all the immense global pressures of the 21st century, we're looking for the real insights behind what on the surface just look like incredible statistics.
And the framework for that is all neatly summarized in their central theme. Solid, stable, soaring, the next quarter century.
Right.
So we really have to break down each of those 3 pillars. What makes the claim of solid growth actually hold up under scrutiny? How did they achieve the stable living standards you need for resilience?
And then the big one.
What foundation has been laid to justify the soaring ambition they've set for themselves, taking them all the way to 2050?
What makes this entire narrative so compelling, and what we should probably focus on right from the jump, is the sheer resilience it took to execute this. The Governor General Sir Rodney Williams, he made it really clear this quarter century of success was achieved despite facing repeated devastating natural disasters.
And we're talking Category 5 hurricanes, floods that can just wipe out years of infrastructure in a day.
And on top of that, massive external financial shocks. I mean, you think about surviving the 2008 global financial crisis, then the unprecedented disruption of the COVID-19 pandemic, and still somehow maintaining a sustained upward trajectory.
That contextualizes everything, doesn't it?
It has to.
For a small island developing state or SIDs, those external shocks are magnified exponentially. Their economies are inherently less diversified.
Right.
So the impact of a global tourism downturn or a natural disaster is usually immediate, catastrophic. It often leads to these deep debt cycles.
Right.
The fact that their sources frame this as an achievement despite those hurdles, it suggests their growth wasn't just, opportunistic. It wasn't based on a lucky oil find. It must have been built on a strategy of structural strength.
And a capacity to rebuild fast.
A very rapid reconstruction capability.
So it sets a remarkably high bar for our analysis today. Okay, let's unpack the biggest headline number, the one that defines the solid part of their theme. How exactly do you turn a national economy valued at $802 million in the year 2000 into an economy worth over $2 billion in a 25-year period? Let's start with that core achievement, the one that anchors this whole narrative.
The tripling of their gross domestic product. The GDP. The sources are very explicit on the numbers, moving from $802 million in 2000 to an estimate that's now exceeding $2 billion USD by 2025-2026.
That is just an astounding figure.
Yeah.
We're talking about an extraordinary 300% growth rate over 25 years. If we do some rough math on that, it implies a compound annual growth rate, a FIAG of what? Consistently above 4.5%, maybe 5%.
Something like that, yeah.
And sustaining that rate for 2.5 decades while dodging global recessions and recovering from major climatic events.
Okay.
That's what truly sets this apart.
Exactly. And we have to discuss why that percentage is especially remarkable for SCIDs. As we said, small island nations, they just lack the economic diversification of large continental countries.
Sure.
So, for instance, the 2 biggest drivers of growth here would be, high-end tourism and the financial services sector.
Okay, and think about 2008.
Well, when the 2008 financial crisis hit, those are precisely the 2 sectors that just seize up globally.
It's a double dependency problem, isn't it?
It is.
If investment capital dries up in New York or London, then the foreign direct investment into their tourism projects just stalls. And if disposable income drops in their key tourist markets, visitor numbers just fall off a cliff.
So sustaining a 5% WNEGR means they must have implemented some aggressive, very deliberate policies of stimulation and diversification during those downturns.
It implies what kind of percentage split are we likely looking at for that $2 billion valuation? The sources are a bit silent on the exact breakdown, but given their strategic focus, we can probably infer that tourism and related construction That must account for the lion's share.
Probably 70% or more, sure. But the financial services sector has clearly been the targeted area for high-value, sustainable non-tourism revenue.
And that's a crucial distinction.
It really is. The sheer volume of growth likely came from tourism, building new resorts, marinas, supporting infrastructure. But the structural resilience, the capacity to pay down debt and fund social programs, that often comes from stable revenue sources.
There's financial services.
Like financial services, registration fees, and local control of strategic assets, which we'll get into later when we talk about the banking sector buyout and empowerment capitalism. The magnitude of that 300% growth tells us they mastered the art of attracting foreign capital without becoming completely beholden to it.
Sir Rodney Williams captured the sentiment. He said, "This is no small feat. It is a testament to the resilience and hard work of the people." But, from a strictly analytical point of view, what specific economic pillars must have been robust enough to absorb the impact of all those crises and still maintain this upward trajectory?
Well, to sustain that kind of growth, you need stability beneath all the surface volatility.
Okay.
So first, robust infrastructure that is consistently modernized and climate-proofed. If you build a new resort, it has to be hardened against a Category 5 storm.
Otherwise, the insurance payout covers the loss, but the economic activity is just gone for years.
Exactly. And that requires continuous public investment, something we see reflected in their water security initiative.
Okay, so that's one. What else?
Secondly, you need a high-value sector. You can't achieve 300% growth on low-margin mass tourism. It just doesn't scale that way. The attraction of world-renowned brands like Rosewood and Nobu, which we'll discuss in the Barbuda context, it suggests a very deliberate policy focus on quality and a high average expenditure per visitor. This strategy maximizes revenue while, potentially minimizing the environmental and social pressures of mass market volume.
And a third pillar.
And third, and maybe the most subtle, is the financial architecture. They needed a stable, locally controlled financial sector that was capable of retaining and mobilizing domestic capital.
Because if you rely solely on foreign banks,
then when global markets tighten, domestic investment is the first thing to dry up. By taking control of their banks, they ensured a continuous source of credit for local entrepreneurs and state projects, insulating themselves from some of those foreign shockwaves.
that structural resilience is the mechanism that turns raw GDP growth into something dependable. So that $2 billion economy provides the solid foundation for the theme. But now we have to shift our focus. We need to know how that enormous surge in national wealth actually translated into measurable quality of life improvements for the people.
Right, because when we're analyzing a nation's success, we can't just stop at GDP.
Of course not.
While tripling the national account is impressive, the crucial question, especially in developing states, is always, how is that wealth distributed? And that leads us to the critical metrics beyond mere production, specifically the Human Development Index, or HDI.
The sources highlight two critical pieces of data here. First, the average per capita income exceeds $60,000.
A very high figure.
It is. It's certainly far above regional averages, which indicates that a substantial pool of wealth is being created and, ostensibly circulating.
And just to put that $60,000 figure into perspective for you, that's roughly US $22,200. This places them firmly in the upper middle income bracket globally.
But per capita income can sometimes be skewed by high earners.
Exactly. The true metric that signifies genuinely stable progress is their UN ranking on the Human Development Index.
And that's the real kicker. Antigua and Barbuda is ranked 53rd globally on the HDI. For our listener, the HDI is that holistic measure of a nation's achievement across three basic dimensions. Health, so a long and healthy life. Education, access to knowledge, and standard of living, which is the per capita income part.
And the significance of that 53rd ranking cannot be overstated. This is where the sources provide a really powerful comparative context. This ranking explicitly places the nation ahead of every other Caribbean country.
Wow.
This isn't just about being the best in the neighborhood. This places them globally in the same echelon as many highly developed European nations or wealthy Gulf states.
So achieving a top 53 rank means that the economic surge wasn't just some flash-in-the-pan construction boom tied to a single commodity.
No.
It implies deep-seated institutional strength, consistent public health improvements, and a successful education system that's generating the human capital you need to sustain the growth. You just can't fake a good HDI score.
You really can't. And it raises the important question, what metrics, beyond just income, must have improved so substantially to get that high rating? We can infer that their health outcomes, specifically life expectancy and maternal or infant mortality rates, they must be highly competitive globally.
Which means major investments in modernizing the national hospital system, ensuring universal access to quality primary care.
For sure. And on the education front, it means a policy focus on raising both educational attainment, so the average years of schooling, and quality. For example, if they're aiming to be a leader in technology by 2050, as their vision suggests.
Then they must have spent the last 25 years building out vocational training, increasing university enrollment, and ensuring high adult literacy rates.
This is critical for connecting back to that initial 300% GDP growth. That growth provided the tax base necessary to fund these social infrastructure improvements. The stability of their living standards, reflected by that HDI score, is tangible proof that the solid GDP growth was systematically invested back into the nation's people.
Creating a self-reinforcing virtuous cycle.
Exactly. Where better educated citizens then fuel the high-value sectors.
It also ensures resilience on a personal level. That high EC $60,000 per capita income, when you couple it with the underlying infrastructure implied by a top 53 HDI ranking, it means citizens have access to better jobs, better schools, greater protection against personal economic shocks. It shifts the entire risk profile for the average Antiguan and Barbudan citizen.
It suggests a really successful governmental effort to broad-base the benefits of growth. Sure. A high HDI ranking proves that the nation is moving away from that classic two-tier economy model,
where a small elite benefits from foreign investment while the majority struggles.
Right, and moving towards genuine national prosperity. The stability of the populace is, in fact, a crucial economic asset. It ensures the long-term political continuity you need for these ambitious 2050 plans.
Okay, so now we shift from the nation as a whole to a very focused, targeted, and frankly politically complex part of the strategy, the transformation of the sister isle, Barbuda. This is the segment where the theme moves firmly from solid and stable right into soaring.
The sources outline a very deliberate, very high-stakes mission here: to transform Barbuda into an economic powerhouse. And in doing so, end what the government characterized as decades of economic stagnation.
And that's not just regional development talk.
No, it's a clear strategic mandate to integrate the economies of the two islands fully and equitably.
That framing, transforming it into a net contributor to the national treasury, that suggests that Barbuda was previously a financial dependent, just relying on transfers from Antigua.
That's the implication, yes.
So correcting that economic imbalance isn't just an infrastructure project. It's a major political, social, and economic undertaking, especially when you consider the history and the governance structure of Barbuda.
And they are attacking this imbalance through highly specific, high-impact investment and partnerships. The source material details significant investments in luxury hospitality and supporting infrastructure, and it specifically names the world-renowned brands involved.
Rosewood and Nobu.
Rosewood and Nobu.
Okay, so this is where we have to introduce a critical question. Critics often argue that if you rely exclusively on these ultra-luxury brands, you're creating a dangerous dependency on a very niche, very volatile market, and you potentially exclude local businesses. How did the sources address that risk, the need for genuine local benefit?
The sources imply the strategy is about leveraging that exclusivity to maximize returns and minimize the environmental footprint.
Okay.
By attracting these global magnets for high-net-worth individuals, they ensure a higher average tourist expenditure, maximizing the economic benefit per visitor. And this influx of capital then funds the necessary infrastructure, which benefits locals, before they localize the benefits through mechanisms like empowerment capitalism and, crucially, land reform.
Let's talk about that infrastructure. The planned construction includes a new international airport and a new seaport.
These projects are the strategic foundation of the whole transformation. A high-end resort can't function relying on transfers from Antigua's airport. They need direct, reliable international access for the private jet clientele.
And a seaport for the superyacht market.
Exactly. These upgrades essentially remove the logistical bottleneck that previously capped Barbuda's potential. Building a port and an airport on that scale turns Barbuda into its own economic gateway, which is crucial for its planned shift into a net contributor.
But the truly profound element here, the one that addresses the social equity question directly, is the historic land reform. The sources highlight the government's efforts to grant long overdue land ownership rights to Barbudans, correcting what was referred to as a generation-long injustice.
And this is the essential social equity angle you need to make the economic development politically and socially sustainable.
You can't foster broad-based wealth creation on an island where the fundamental asset, the land, isn't securely owned by the local population.
You can't. Without legal title, citizens can't use land as collateral, they can't secure bank loans, they can't meaningfully invest in their own businesses.
So, by granting these rights, the government is simultaneously achieving several goals. It's providing social equity, correcting a historic wrong, and most importantly, providing collateral for local capital formation.
Right.
It allows Barbudan citizens to leverage that asset and directly participate in the economic boom brought by the Nobu and Rosewood investments, rather than just being employees.
And that creates a direct foundational link between the macroeconomic surge and individual participation. It ensures that the benefits of the massive infrastructure and the foreign investment are accessible at the grassroots level. As Sir Rodney declared, Barbuda is no longer the forgotten island. It is a shining example of what can be achieved when vision and determination meet.
And that determination is evident in tackling both the political historic wrongs and the economic constraints at the same time.
A very complex maneuver.
That approach, using high-end external capital to fund the infrastructure while implementing land reform to ensure the local population benefits directly, that is a genuine masterclass in development strategy. Now, as we transition, this Barbuda transformation brings us directly to the foundational constraints of any island state.
Securing the essentials.
Exactly. Securing the essentials, specifically water and financial independence. The strategic priority is clear. Massive investment, like the Barbuda transformation, can't proceed without securing two non-negotiables: water for physical capacity.
And local capital for financial stability.
Okay, let's start with water. The sources acknowledge that water scarcity has plagued the nation for a long time. It's actively hindered growth, not just tourism, but population health, agriculture, just general quality of life. For a nation so focused on the HDI, water is absolutely foundational.
It's the ultimate infrastructure bottleneck. You cannot sustain a high-end tourism industry or a rising population or guarantee basic living standards in the tropics without reliable access to fresh water, especially with the rising intensity of droughts and climatic shifts.
The numbers here, they show a stunning commitment to removing this constraint. We are talking about a dramatic threefold increase in desalination capacity.
It's a huge number.
Rising from 3.5 million gallons of fresh water daily in 2014 to over 11 million gallons today.
A threefold increase in under a decade is massive. This required not only securing the capital, but also implementing some very sophisticated reverse osmosis, or RO, technology at scale.
Right.
And if we synthesize this surge with the GDP growth we talked about earlier, this level of water security is fundamental infrastructure for both climate resilience and tourism capacity.
I mean, think of the immediate economic relief this provides. Restricted development permits because of water limits. Gone. The expensive reliance on shipping and water during dry seasons is mitigated. By increasing production capacity by 300%, they have essentially removed a fundamental governor on their economic expansion.
And they've increased the social carrying capacity of the islands. And the long-term strategy involves more than just production. The sources detail plans for improving storage infrastructure, expanding distribution systems, and relying on crucial international partnerships. The specific mention of Cuba and China supporting these efforts is a key diplomatic and strategic detail.
Partnering with countries like Cuba and China on something as essential as water security, that suggests a very savvy diplomatic strategy. It shows a willingness to secure expertise and financing from diverse global sources, transcending the traditional Western dependency models to solve existential problems.
And it ensures sustainability, knowledge transfer for future operations, and a diversification of technical aid. Solving water scarcity is arguably the single most important physical barrier they've overcome to justify the long-term sustainability of that solid growth claim. So if water security is the physical foundation, then financial independence is the institutional one. The source highlights what it calls a historic moment.
Right.
The transformation of the banking sector through the government's decision to buy out the assets of foreign banks.
This is a massive assertion of national control. Moving critical economic infrastructure from foreign hands into local institutions, they specifically identify the institutions now in control: ACB Caribbean and ECCAB.
So what does this aggressive acquisition strategy actually mean for the average citizen and the economy?
That's the question.
Well, when foreign banks control significant assets, capital often leaks out of the system through repatriated profits. And critically, Lending decisions are often made very conservatively, based on global risk criteria that are established abroad. They're not prioritizing national development goals or local businesses.
That makes perfect sense. During a major recession or a hurricane, a foreign bank might tighten lending or even pull out entirely.
Of course, but when local institutions like ACB Caribbean and ECCAB assume control, the capital, the profits, the reserves, the lending capacity, it can be retained and strategically directed towards national priorities.
Like funding those desalination projects we just talked about.
Exactly. Or providing mortgages for Barbudan citizens who are leveraging their newly granted land titles.
The symbolism here is profound. The stated goal is full control of our financial sector, which symbolizes a broader effort to take charge of our economic destiny.
It's a huge move.
This transition of critical financial assets into local hands has enormous implications for capital retention and national sovereignty. It essentially provides a self-funding mechanism for their 2050 ambition.
It does. But we should note, taking over foreign bank assets is incredibly complex. It requires huge capital reserves, sophisticated asset valuation, managing the integration of foreign systems into local regulatory frameworks.
So how did they manage the operational risk and the potential disruption?
Well, the success implied by the $2 billion GDP and the continued stability of that HDI ranking suggests they managed the transition very smoothly. They likely phased the buyouts and ensured continuity of service, leveraging their local regulatory expertise.
And the net effect?
The net effect is that they created a monetary system where the growth generated by tourism and technology is overwhelmingly retained within the national borders, and that leads to more guaranteed reinvestment into infrastructure and social services. It's a powerful statement of economic autonomy.
A very powerful move to ensure the nation benefits maximally from its own growth. And speaking of ensuring benefits are shared widely, the next section details a specific and I think unique policy mechanism designed to do exactly that.
This section introduces a truly innovative and I'd say ideologically significant policy concept. The government's explicit move to democratize wealth creation.
Right.
They call it empowerment capitalism. And this is not a tax and spend policy. It's an active attempt to broaden ownership in the national success story.
And this is where we shift from the national accounts to individual opportunity. So how does this actually work on the ground? What's the tangible mechanism of participation that turns this concept from a philosophy into a functioning economic policy?
The source material details the specific initiatives, and it's primarily the sale of shares in government-owned enterprises.
Okay.
The key differentiator here is the intent. This is not standard privatization where, a single wealthy investor or a foreign firm buys the asset. This is a policy designed to intentionally spread ownership widely across the domestic population, often through small share packages designed to be accessible to average citizens.
And the West Indies Oil Company, or WIOC, is used as the prime case study here. And WIOC is not just any company. It's a crucial strategic asset for energy logistics, distribution, and supply for the entire country. So under this empowerment capitalism model, ordinary citizens can now purchase shares.
And thus participate in the wealth building and share the profits generated by this strategic national asset.
That's the core engine.
It is. It directly supports the goal of social equity that they mentioned in the 2050 vision. It's an explicit policy tool to ensure that growth benefits are shared widely, moving wealth creation away from being concentrated among a select few investors and putting it into the hands of the populace.
And it connects directly back to that high EC $60,000 per capita income figure we discussed. It's aiming to make that statistical average a reality for more people.
It is.
But let's explore the mechanics a bit more. How is this legally structured? How does empowerment capitalism legally differ from, say, standard open market privatization? Is there a limit on how many shares one citizen can buy to prevent wealthy individuals from just consolidating ownership?
Based on the principles they've outlined, there must be strict legal constraints. For this to qualify as democratizing wealth, the shares are likely packaged in small, affordable tranches, perhaps with a cap on individual purchase limits and a reservation policy that ensures these shares are offered exclusively or preferentially to Antiguan and Barbudan citizens first.
So it guarantees mass participation.
And it maintains the strategic, state-owned nature of the enterprise while allowing citizens to partake in the dividends.
If citizens are shareholders in major infrastructure, like the national oil company, they become invested stakeholders in the nation's success. It links their individual economic stability and savings directly to the performance of government-owned strategic assets.
That's a potent tool for long-term political and economic cohesion. It ensures public buy-in for future projects.
Precisely. It turns the entire population into direct beneficiaries of the state's economic success stories. It moves beyond traditional wealth redistribution models like state pensions or social welfare and into the direct provision of wealth creation participation.
The stability gained from the economic surge is now being cemented by ensuring social buy-in through shared ownership. It makes that 25-year boom politically sustainable.
It sounds like a very intentional move to inoculate the nation against future social unrest by ensuring that prosperity is visible and accessible at every level of society. Okay, so now that they have successfully leveraged the past 25 years and secured the present, we have to look at the ambitious path laid out for the next generation.
Sir Rodney Williams dedicated a really significant portion of the speech to outlining this ambitious vision for the next quarter century, taking the nation right up to 2050.
And this isn't just a prediction, it's a commitment. It's a roadmap that attempts to translate their present success into future global relevance.
The key pillars of future focus are very clearly articulated, and they show a continuity with the achievements we've already discussed.
Right. First, sustainable economic growth. So continuing the rapid success of the last 25 years, but with a real environmental focus.
Second, social equity. Deepening the work they started with the land reform and empowerment capitalism.
And third, infrastructure development, expanding and climate-proofing the foundational successes of water and the Barbuda projects.
These pillars demonstrate a crucial realization. Future growth has to be resilient, it has to be inclusive, and it has to be environmentally sound. They recognize that if growth is to be sustained, it must be decoupled from damaging practices and focused on creating opportunities that benefit the entire social structure.
But the truly audacious part lies in the global leadership goals. By 2050, the nation aims to be a global leader in 3 specific areas: clean energy, technology, and tourism.
And this is the dramatic pivot. We are moving from a strategy of stabilization and recovery to claiming global leadership in specific high-tech and sustainable sectors. This is no longer about catching up. This is about setting the pace and defining best practices internationally for other SIs to follow.
Okay, let's start with clean energy leadership.
Yeah.
What does that specifically entail for a small island state? It has to be more than just generating their own renewable power.
Right. It implies becoming a net exporter of clean energy knowledge, maybe even technology, or acting as a global model for achieving total energy independence and climate resilience.
Which would demand massive, sustained investments.
It would. Given the geography, they likely focus on maximizing utility-scale solar arrays and maybe offshore wind farms. But becoming a global leader means solving the critical energy storage challenge for island grids, something many larger nations are still struggling with.
And they'd need to mobilize that locally controlled capital from the banking sector to fund this transition entirely away from expensive, volatile, imported fossil fuels.
Precisely.
And aiming for global leadership in technology. That implies more than just having good internet service.
Much more. This requires a massive coordinated focus on digital infrastructure, developing specialized skills training, and creating a regulatory environment that's conducive to high-tech industries.
Yes, think about niche specialization. As a global leader in technology for small states, they could focus on areas like fintech.
Leveraging their newly controlled financial sector to develop digital banking and regulatory technologies.
Or climate data science, given their deep experience in climate resilience and reconstruction. This is an ambitious diversification away from purely service-based tourism, creating high-wage, exportable services.
And that technological buffer is the ultimate goal of resilience. If the next 25 years see another global tourism slowdown, another pandemic or global recession, the strength and revenues from technology and clean energy leadership would provide the necessary economic stability.
So the government is committed to ensuring continued investment in renewable energy and technological innovation as the key to laying this groundwork.
And the end goal, as stated by Sir Rodney, is the unifying mission: to ensure that every Antiguan and Barbudan has the opportunity to participate in wealth creation, secure a better future, and contribute to the collective prosperity of our nation.
That statement really synthesizes the entire strategy perfectly. They're using the wealth accumulated in the first quarter century, that $2 billion GDP, to build platforms like clean energy, technology, empowerment capitalism that can guarantee opportunity and shared prosperity for the second quarter century.
It's aiming for nothing less than a completely transformed, globally competitive, and socially equitable society by the time 2050 arrives.
The sources outline a powerful narrative of intentional patient development and sustained achievement.
And it proves that strategic governance under duress can yield monumental results.
This has been an incredibly detailed look at a quarter century of intentional, rapid growth, all synthesized under that theme Sir Rodney presented: solid, stable, soaring.
Solid is proven unequivocally by the macroeconomic triumph. That 300% GDP growth, achieved despite immense global and environmental pressures. It confirms the effectiveness of their structural policy responses during downturns.
Stable is demonstrated through the exceptional human impact, a high per capita income, and that prestigious 53rd Global Human Development Index ranking, placing them ahead of every other Caribbean country.
And that shows institutional maturity and broad, measurable societal benefits across health and education.
And soaring is the ambitious, forward-looking strategy, highlighted by the economic transformation of Barbuda, the assertion of financial independence, and that strategic roadmap toward 2050, aiming for global leadership in clean energy, tech, and high-value tourism.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the source material shows a nation moving intentionally from stabilizing foundational issues,
like securing a threefold increase in water capacity and taking full local control of the banking sector,
to actively engineering mechanisms for shared wealth through empowerment capitalism and setting concrete global benchmarks for the future.
This transformation is a comprehensive study in strategic governance. They recognize their vulnerabilities, they fix their critical physical infrastructure bottlenecks,
and simultaneously implemented equity-focused policies to ensure the populace had ownership over the massive economic shift, ensuring that the progress wasn't just temporary or concentrated at the top.
Which raises an important question, something for you to mull over or explore on your own. When a small island state specifically overcomes deep-rooted resource challenges like historic water scarcity and resolves generation-long social injustices like the Barbuda land reform, simultaneously with aggressive self-directed economic growth, what is the ultimate limit of their ambition? And what specific lessons does this detailed strategic planning offer to other developing nations facing similar climatic or historical hurdles?